King Crimson's Discipline. And in the opening track, you heard Mata Kadusai. And now you're going to hear my favorite track, Frame by Frame. Okay, Matt, what are the stats on Discipline?
So Discipline by King Crimson comes in at number 85 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 3 in 1981, number 566 of all time. It's their third highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind Red from 1974 and In the Court of the Crimson King from 1969. So hitting each decade here with King Crimson. We did cover those albums in previous episodes. And this album did not make Rolling Stone's list. I don't think any King Crimson made Rolling Stone's list, if I think about it now. So,
and as we mentioned, this is the second act that chalks in with an album in each of the decades we've covered, with David Bowie being the first. I believe there's one other down the road, but
that deserves official CTS Hall of Fame.
It's pretty damn impressive
credibility.
And the other crossover there is Robert Fripp helping Bowie on Low and some of those other albums as well.
Robert Fripp's like a low-key CTS Hall of Famer because he's on a lot of... He's also on... I forget, he was on some weird albums where he contributed guitar too. Remember? There was somebody he was on with who was like a pop female singer, and it's like, and then we brought Robert Fripp in, and he just was all over the place. So
he played with Diana Ross.
He's got his own phrase too, Frippertronics or something. I saw. I think in regards to his electronic music
fripping out.
Yeah. So yeah,
a Fripp on the radar.
Perfect seg there, Matt. We covered Red and In Court of the Crimson King. This album is their 8th album, and it was released September 21st, 1981. And we last covered Red in 1974, and they really had only a 7-year hiatus between those albums. They did release a live album called USA in 75. So between USA and this, we didn't really miss anything in terms of coverage.
That will be a trend tonight, by the way, just FYI.
Yeah.
So continue. Yep.
Only guitarist Robert Fripp and drummer Bill Bruford remained from the previous incarnation of the band when we heard them in Red. And they added bassist Tony Levin and guitarist / vocalist / lyricist and Adrian Belew this time around. Now, you may or may not remember that Fripp disbanded the group in 74, saying the band, quote, ceased to exist and, quote, was completely over forever and ever. So that was a lie.
I really mean it.
Yeah. During this time, Fripp pursued spiritual interests and played with Bowie and Peter Gabriel and Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
How long until one of us pursues spiritual interests and takes a hiatus? Let's hope not for a while, but yeah.
Yeah. When I say it's completely over forever and ever, then we'll know.
7 years later.
Yeah.
90s.
He also had a solo career during this intermission, and he had a short-lived new wave band called League of Gentlemen also that put out an album that I couldn't find on Amazon Music, so maybe it's on Spotify.
League of Gentlemen.
Yeah. And in 1980, late 1980, Fripp formed a band without the intention of it being King Crimson, and he recruited Bill Bruford back and the other members, Tony Levin and Adrian Belew, and they also, some of them auditioned for the group as well, so they weren't just brought in automatically. They started out actually as the name Discipline for this band, but then when they were recording in England, they later changed their name to King Crimson. Probably a smart move to capitalize on their previous success. As is usual with King Crimson, there is experimentation on this album. I'll give them that. Every album we've listened to has been different. I think our thoughts on Red was that it was pretty metal and heavy, and in the Court of the Crimson King is definitely prog and different from that album. So, and this album is different from those two. They drew on newer influences when crafting this album, like punk and funk and world music. I think all of those can be heard to some extent, one extent or another, on this. They, in addition to bass, Levin also played an instrument called the Chapman stick, which is a two-handed tapping guitar instrument that has bass and treble ranges. So it kind of is a weird, does look stick-like if you look it up. It's kind of a sitar in a way too, or in the look of that you hold it upright like that. So that was interesting. And Bruford, the drummer, experimented with an electronic drum kit on this album and cymbaless acoustic drums as well. Improvisation was also used, but reined in compared to some of the previous albums. And Adrian Belew kind of brought more of a pop sensibility to the song structure and the writing. He wrote a lot of the lyrics for this. Well, as much lyrics as there are, at least, and so that also contributed to the sound of the album. Fripp's, some interesting facts on this. Mata Kudusai means please wait in Japanese, if you were wondering, and the Indiscipline lyrics were based on a letter from Adrian Belew's then wife Margaret about a painting she had done. And Thela Hun Ginji is an anagram of heat in the jungle, which they say in the lyrics of the song, or say heat in the jungle, I think. And while the track was being recorded, Adrian Belew was walking around London with a tape recorder looking for inspiration and was harassed by a gang and then the police. And you can hear that story in the song itself. Fripp recorded it without his knowledge and then put it in the song too, when he was telling the bandmates about the story. Fripp's electric guitars also played in 7/8 time during part of that song, so that kind of gives an interesting time signature and feel to it. The instrumental track Sheltering Sky is based on the 1949 novel of the same name by author Paul Bowles, and he is kind of associated with the beat poets in that era, even though he's kind of got like one foot in based on what I saw reading him. He lived in, also, kind of associated with the beat poets is like Morocco and Tangiers and kind of that area of Africa, and I think he lived over there for a while and kind of brought some fame or recognition to that area. This album reached 41 on the UK album charts and 45 on the Billboard 200. Initial reviews were mixed to positive, and this is the last time we cover them, although they did make albums in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
Damn.
All four members of this lineup incarnation are still alive. The later incarnations have different members. One of the original founders from in the Court of the Crimson King has died, and some of those other members have died as well. But all four of these guys are still kicking it. So, what did you kick it one time? John, what did you think of Discipline?
Yeah, I am a fan, man, of King Crimson. I love their spins on music that doesn't always speak to me. This is the type of prog rock I like, where it's audacious and incredibly musically proficient across all instruments and varied. It's got world music elements, but not in a way that irritates me or seems appropriated. It's heavy when it needs to be from the guitar lines that are in here. So it's a lot of things. It's like a heavier version of prog and world music, which would not sound like it would be a good compilation of things. Now the drums on this, Josh, are they traditional drums or is it like electric drums?
I think
like drum machine.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think there's different ones throughout or interspersed.
Yeah, because it feels like I'm listening to like a drum machine at times, which was the only part at times I didn't love as much because unpopular opinion in this day and age, for some reason people like are really into electric drums now, which has never been a sound that I like as much as real drums, but I'm in the minority, I think, especially with, the whole In the Air Tonight and everybody like losing their shit over that. But anyway, that's a sidetrack right there. But the standouts on this one are the virtuoso playing, which I was amazed by at times, like how it kind of came together. It was, I know I don't want to overuse the word frantic because I used it in our last review, but there was a frantic element, much like the first album we covered, which was Juju by Susie and the Banshees. There's a tribal drumming and weaving guitar element on this as well, but the weaving guitar here, though, is outside of sort of the post-punk realm, and this one's clearly more in what I would consider to be like the prog realm, but rooted also in traditional rock and roll guitar as well, which is why it's funny because it's like Discipline is the album, right? And like what that guitar does is it adds like a level of discipline to the sound in some ways, is the note I wrote to myself. There's 2 instrumentals, right? The last 2 tracks.
Yep. Correct.
Yep, which I liked quite a bit. Where does this album break into what's the album? Like I didn't look it up, Josh. Where does it break from like side A to side B?
Sure. The first 4 tracks are side A, so Elephant Talk, Frame by Frame, Matakadusai, and Indiscipline, and then side B is Thealahun Ginji, and the two instrumental tracks.
I was wondering if the 2 instrumentals were side B, and all the spoken stuff was side A, stylistically. What does the Chapman stick sound like, Josh?
That's a good question. I think it's got bass and treble on it, so it's I think replacing the bass at times in the songs. Yeah,
because I made a lot of notes about the fact that the bass sound was interesting, and I attribute it to like a recording, like a production or recording sound. But I'm wondering now if what I was thinking was a way of recording or production oriented was really the Chapman stick and what that sounds like. Do you know which songs?
It says here that it's a member of the guitar family. It usually has 10 or 12 individually tuned strings and is used to play bass lines, melody lines, chords, or textures.
Yeah, it's also
really skinny.
It's polyphonic too, whatever that means.
Because I specifically mentioned the bass in Thealahun Ginjit and Elephant Talk as being where I thought the bass sound was uniquely produced, and I'd be curious as we dig into it a little bit if those are the 2 songs that might have used it quite a bit, and if like what I was hearing and attributing to production tricks was really just the Chapman stick. So that's going to be a cleaning the stack for me. Potentially down the road. But yeah, this one gets a strong thumbs up for me. I was a thumbs up on all 3 King Crimson albums, but I think this might be my favorite of the 3, to be honest. I really enjoyed this one.
Nice.
Yeah, I like this too. This might be the most consistent of the 3, because I definitely remember there's a long track in the Court of the Crimson King that's basically just noises. Right, so it's long, right, and I think that Red had one of those too, maybe not as long, but it's hard. But this doesn't have that, right? I think each one of these songs stands alone on its own to kind of be an enjoyable song, right? Whereas I think maybe the other 2 albums you might skip it. So in that sense, John, I might agree with you that this is a more consistent record. It's amazing that Adrian Belew was on here. Josh, I don't think you mentioned. Did you mention that he also had played on Remain in Light with the Talking Heads? That he had played. Yeah, so I remember that.
He in Yes? There. Was he in Yes?
No, I don't think so.
Bill Bruford was in Yes.
That's right, Bill Bruford. Oh yeah. Okay, wow. Okay, yeah, you're right.
But Adrian Belew, I think he started with this was him just joining King Crimson after working on Remain in Light. Guys, an Elephant Talk, if that doesn't sound like a Talking Heads song, even to the point where it sounds like David Byrne singing that. Like, and
Yeah.
the lyrics are very much like a David Byrne, where he starts, "Let's talk about talk," and like discourse, and he just starts going through all these words and stuff that he's just shouting out. It's and Thela Hun Ginjit sounds like a Talking Head song as well. Like
Song,
definitely like that polyrhythmic kind of sound. The interesting guitar parts and just kind of the goofy nature of the vocals, it very much sounded like that. So I was waiting to hear if there was any influence there at all, because God, that Elephant Talk in particular sounds like a freaking Talking Head song.
You want to hear something interesting, Matt? Which might I was curious because I looked up Ballou's Robert Ballou's stuff ahead of it, and the first Adrian Ballou, yeah, he was born Robert Ballou here, which is why I think I got thrown.
Okay.
Yeah, his first person he played with was Frank Zappa, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Frank Zappa as a guitarist kind of, in some ways, has some Robert Fripp in him.
Yeah.
In terms of the play, yeah. So,
and that's the
there.
cool part. What you see with the two guitarists here, with Fripp and Ballou, like particularly in a song like "Discipline," that is just the guitar playing that's happening there is insane, and they're both doing totally different things. It's almost like you can hear one guitar in one ear and the other in the other, and it sounds like they're playing totally different things, but together it just syncs well together for some reason, and it's like almost hypnotic. It kind of puts you in this trance because they keep doing it over and over and over again. And I'm like, the amount of, like, how difficult that must be to just keep playing those notes over and over again like that in rapid fashion is just, it's crazy. And so there's parts all over this record that are just have really crazy guitar parts like that, which Discipline might be, maybe that might be my favorite song on here. It's so crazy what's happening with that song. And then you've got songs like Madakadasi and what is it, The Sheltering Sky, which are more, they kind of go, it's almost like a ballad. That Madakadusai is kind of like this, there's not really virtuoso stuff happening there. It's just kind of like this crooning, kind of slower song that's going on, and it's kind of a nice, it's only 3 minutes and 47 seconds, but it's kind of a nice little palate cleanser from like the crazy chaotic nature of what's happening with a lot of the other songs. But yeah, this is kind of crazy stuff that you're hearing here, and just looking at, I got the Wikipedia thing up on here, and it says Pitchfork considers it an influence on math rock, and that's not a term that I thought of while listening to it, but after reading that, I'm like, yeah, like my understanding of math rock seems it's like a very calculated, very complex, very structurally tight kind of, piece of music. And this definitely sounds like that. So, yeah, I might be with you, John. This might be my favorite King Crimson album. It doesn't have, I think, my favorite song was on Red. I forget what the last track on that was. That was just a fantastic song. But I think this is probably more consistent. Maybe those other records are more groundbreaking or whatever. But this was if I was to play this album from start to finish, I would probably choose this one over the other two. So I'd probably go with you on that. But yeah, it's great. These guys are like, the virtuoso stuff all over the place here. Very interesting. But John, it's not a crazy prog rock. It's not like 8 different movements and always changing it. Even though it's still prog rock, but it's much more linear. It's really complex, but it kind of sticks with one idea rather than like one, maybe 2 ideas, rather than going like 5 or 6, which some prog rock songs can do. So maybe in that regard, this would be a better entryway into prog rock for some people than maybe some of the Genesis or, I don't know.
Easily.
Pink Floyd or
easily.
Whatever. Yeah, it's just it's a much more it's a softer landing, I would say. So thumbs up. I like this a lot.
Well, let me clean some stacks real quick before we go to Josh. The song you keep thinking of, Matt, is Starless, because I remember that, right?
That's my favorite King Crimson song. Yeah, that was great.
Yep, that's an awesome song. And also a couple more things about Ballou I found interesting here. He worked with Bowie and Eno on Lodger, which we actually never covered, but
is that the other Berlin trilogy album?
You got it. Yep. So that's a piece that I thought was informative on this. And then the other thing I thought was very interesting was that he spun off with the Talking Heads, the Tom Tom Club, which is basically everybody but Byrne. And they actually, Tina Weymouth and Chris France asked Ballou to replace Byrne as the frontman. That he politely turned it down.
Yes.
And although they just Francis Weymouth said that didn't happen. And then I guess also he ended up on the outs with them because he claimed that he wrote half of the songs on the album, and then Weymouth ghosted him his phone calls later.
Oh, God.
So, yeah.
That's what they were mad. That's what Weymouth was mad at David Byrne for doing. Like,
that's why I thought that was interesting, because
yeah,
basically, she did it, and then he's claiming they did the same thing to him. So go figure. So I thought I'd throw all that context in because I found that interesting.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. It's funny. You mentioned the Talking Heads. I never made that connection with the lyrics.
I did
right
away, right away,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm mixed on this album. I really like a lot of the music on it, but I found whenever they inserted lyrics or the pre-recorded, track of his journey in London, that really kind of derailed the experience for me. I found some of the I found the repetition on Elephant Talk and the lyrics kind of grating after a while, even though he does admittedly sound like David Byrne on that. It just didn't work for me for some reason. I do like his voice on Frame by Frame. I think that's my favorite. That kind of sounds like a Pearl Jam song or some sort of like 90s music song that I liked. And I liked him on Mata Kadusai too. I thought that was another good track. In Thela Hun Ginjit, I found the lyrics on that also annoying. So
the spoken lyrics, like the storytelling thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like that stuff was kind of pretentious in some respects. They're doing so much interesting work on the music side that the lyrics I feel like they're trying to be really interesting on the lyric side as well, and I don't think the album necessarily needed that.
That's really interesting, because I almost heard the lyrics as like onomatopoeias, just loose sounds, kind of, Josh.
Yeah. Not me. Every time, the more I listen to this album, the more it kind of like stuck in my head and kind of took me out of it. I really liked. You said it, or one of you guys said it. There is like a trance-like quality to this, and again, this is like the primal drumming type of stuff. There, throughout this whole album, I felt like you would get into a real like groove listening to it. And I think the world music quality that gets inserted into this, it contributes to that, and I really like that. Surprisingly, The Sheltering Sky and Discipline also worked, and I like those because there's no lyrics in them. So I think it'd be interesting to maybe, I don't know, if you could listen to this whole album without lyrics. I wonder what it would be like as an experience. I don't know if I think I liked Red a little bit more in terms of King Crimson, but I respect that they're kind of always reinventing themselves through the years. I definitely felt the funk elements that they put into that, especially on Elephant Talk. There's kind of like this like funky bass line to it, and I can hear some of those other things that they incorporated. Maybe not the punk rock as much, but definitely the world music and the new wave and some of those in the funk. So yeah, this was an interesting listen. I would definitely rate this higher had it for whatever reason, that stuff just kind of really stuck in my craw, and it prevented the album from rising much higher in my estimation. But yeah, it's good. I can definitely, it's like a jam album too in some ways. Like I thought listening to that first track, it would sound really good live. You can imagine a million people dancing to kind of all of the album, like they're in India or something, like some crazy concert. And so yeah, it was interesting listen, but not as high on it as you guys were.
How many listens did you give it, Josh?
3.
That's good. Yeah, I felt, and I still feel to a degree that I need to listen to this more. You know, it's music like this. It's yeah, just demands further listen. Unless you're totally put off by it, like because there might be people that would listen to this being like, no, I can't do this, right? But if it's intriguing to you at all, like I just, especially headphones, I think it's a really good headphones album just to kind of really get into those guitar parts that they're doing, because there's some metal, like the Indiscipline part. There's some heavier stuff going on here as well that they kind of were doing with Red. But I think that this is an even album that could grow on me even more and having me like it even more. But yeah, it's
you are right about it being a headphones album, Matt. And I'd like to point out that I like when bands do artistic ideas that work. And one of the things I liked on this was Indiscipline and Discipline being two virtuoso pieces, but resembling what they're supposed to be. And that Indiscipline was like a chaotic, all over the place, frantic track, and Discipline was very virtuoso in its own way, but in a tight structure that was much more, and I'm sure that was done on purpose. And I wouldn't even be surprised, were they the side enders on the album as well?
Yes.
Yep, that makes sense, because when you listen to those, and it was the second time I listened to this album that I realized, okay, that's interesting. There's an Indiscipline and a Discipline, and I'm like, I wonder if there's and then I listened, I was like, oh, well, it's clear. This is what they were going for. Because you put them side by side and it works. So I appreciated the sensibilities of that as well. And yep, I really like this one. This is my type of prog rock and world music.
This your favorite prog rock album we've done, John? Is that fair to say?
I don't think this is like a true prog rock album, because I think there's just as much like world music influence on, because you can hear how he like is listening to like Fela Kuti and stuff like that as well, to kind of build this. And certainly, the stuff that Eno and David Byrne and stuff were listening to, they were sharing influences, right? And so I don't think of it as a true prog rock album, but this some of the more streamlined, yes. Some of the Rush, I mean that's more my speed than the longer drawn out stuff. Yeah. So if we define this as prog rock, I think King Crimson is the prog rock band that I most connect with.
It's also called post-progressive.
Post-prog.
Post-prog, yeah.
Whatever. At this point. I just like it. I don't need to label it.
Where's the dividing line for post-prog?
There is none. Everything's technically post, right?
It draws upon newer developments in popular music and the avant-garde since the mid-'70s.
Okay, so the mid-'70s.
So, ethnic music and minimalism. Yeah.
Yeah. There's... Yeah, despite the virtuoso guitar work, it is kind of minimal in aspects of it.
I wouldn't use minimal for this album, but I know kind of what you're saying. Production-wise, it's minimal, but
it says here it identifies progressive rock music that stems from sources other than prog. So
well,
it's prog,
world music,
but it's not prog. Yeah.
It's
got to be so hard to start to really describe these genres that are creeping up now. I'm with you. I like it, John.
I'll be post podcast when this.
Post podcast
in the 2020s. We'll be saying, "Oh, this is another post punk album here in 2021." So